So we understand that tests often are measuring socioeconomic factors and then used in our accountability systems. Do you feel that Michigan's accountability system is measuring schools fairly, presenting parents with fair measurements of the schools? And should then those accountability systems be used to determine whether schools are closed?
Look, I don't believe in closing down schools. As the health director in the city of Detroit, I talked to too many families who are worried about their schools shutting down, and the degree to which that is going to interrupt their ability to live their lives is huge. Too many folks have to travel too far to get their kids to schools. And so we know that the system of quote unquote accountability metrics just doesn't work because it measures poverty. The best predictor of whether or not a kid is going to score high on that exam is unfortunately what their family's income level is. And so rather than this punitive system where we measure poverty and then fail to invest in low-income schools, instead we've got to be asking about how we close the gap in terms of what schools get. And I didn't refer to this in my last answer, but right now there's a $780 pay gap. We've got to close that down. The system by which we invest in school buildings that kids are learning in, that's got to be improved. And what we're proposing is a system through our Pure Michigan Infrastructure Bank proposal where we would have a full bank for school infrastructure. It would be funded by a statewide property tax millage. And it would allow schools to use buildings they don't use, sell them off to the state, of course with local approval, then be able to take the money and invest it in the schools that they do use so kids are learning in good and safe classrooms. But right now the idea that somehow we should be measuring and punishing instead of measuring, understanding, and empowering, that doesn't make sense to me. And so we've got to be thinking quite differently about how we assess. Now look, it's really, really important to hold teachers accountable, but I think the accountability has a lot more to do with the soft metrics of how a teacher is in the classroom and the way we're empowering. And certainly we shouldn't hold teachers accountable for the fact that we've disinvested in the means of educating a child in the first place and then ask them to be pulling superhero tricks in the classroom because it's just not fair. And that's the reason why so many young people don't go into education anymore. Is because they know it's punitive, they know they can't make the same living that they could have in the past, and they know that they're going to be blamed for the failure of a system that has disinvested in schools.
Regarding the My Scholars program, how do you plan on paying for that? What's your plan?
So the state right now has about a $56 billion budget. If you were to trace down all of the money that we use to subsidize huge corporations in the state of Michigan, it comes out to somewhere between $11+ billion. That ends up being about 20% of our annual budget every year. And it comes down to deciding whether or not we as a state believe that the state's responsibility is to underwrite a huge number, or in a huge way, a number of corporations that have ultimately offshored or automated our jobs, or the state's responsibility is to invest in people and places. I choose the latter. I think our responsibility as a state is to invest in our people and to invest in the places that they live, learn, work, pray, play. And in order to do that, that means investing in schools, investing in higher education, investing in infrastructure. The money is there. The priorities are not. And so right now, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC, I think has become a vehicle that has lost its way. And I think we've really got to be thinking about whether or not the investments that we're making now are in the best interest of our community and the future of our state. So the money's there, the priorities are not. Second part of this, though, is also working with Michigan public education institutions to talk about why the cost of higher education has gotten so high in the first place. And a lot of that is because of administrative cost. And so I'd love to work with our public colleges and universities to ask, how can we start bringing down the cost of administration in our public colleges and universities? How do we make this more affordable over time? And in the interim, also start making the investments both through the My Scholars grant and also into baseline grants to our higher education institutions so that we can meet in the middle. Because if we can't invest in our young people and we're not keeping them here, we will not have the kind of economy that we want for the future. And this is fundamentally about the future of Michigan.